This lesson, I want to introduce you to JSON and give you a quick overview of how we're going to be using JSON data via AJAX, sending that information over to the server, retrieving that information, and then also sending a response back from the server. And these technologies are ideal. They really work well together, and you're going to see a lot of web applications and websites using these in combination with each other. So JSON essentially is JavaScript object notation. So it's an open standard format that's a more readable format to transmit text and data information instead of using something like XML, which is a little bit harder to read. And initially, if you go over and if you see a comparison of a JSON file and an XML file, you're going to really see the difference, because down here we do have a sample of a JSON file, and just by looking at it, you can make sense of the data that's contained within it. So you can see that this is a person, this is some information about a person, we've got age, address. So it is a really readable, nice output format that we can look at, and we can actually understand what's contained within that data. So JSON files have an extension of JSON, so that's short for JSON. And when we look at this data, so I can just simply copy this over, and we're going to go over to my JSON storage here. Just make sure that I got everything. And once we save it, we can see that the actual output of that JSON file is going to be more compressed, so it's a minified version. This is the output of it, and it is still really readable, not as readable once we've broken it down into the separate lines, but it is still very manageable and readable. So if you are looking at that JSON data, it really just does make sense as you parse through it and output that content into your web application. So another technology that we're going to be using within this course is AJAX. And what AJAX does is it allows us to send and retrieve data into our web application, so into our web page dynamically. And this basically means that we can send over using JavaScript to send an AJAX call, and we don't have to do a page reload. So this is a really big improvement over page refreshes when we do a call over to the server, or if we need some dynamic input and dynamic data, then we don't need to reload the page. So typically previously before, if you're not using an AJAX call and you want to get some data from your server, so maybe a PHP server, you want to see these outputs, you need to reload the page and pick up that information dynamically and render it out into the HTML of your web application. So with AJAX, this saves us all the trouble, and we can just do an AJAX call. We've got a sample of one over here where it's sending data over to AJAX, send ajax-data.php. So it's getting information from there, sending that over. It's doing a call over, and it's retrieving that text that it's actually being sent back. So this is what AJAX can do. We're also going to be using the jQuery version of AJAX. So this is a much more simplified version. So I know that this initially, it looks like there's quite a lot of lines of code here. And with jQuery, much like everything with jQuery, they really do simplify making AJAX calls. And a lot of web developers prefer just, if you've got a lot of AJAX calls that you need to make, then they bring in the jQuery library simply just for the AJAX calls. So it's a really powerful way to get and retrieve data. And as we can see here, that this is essentially doing the same thing. So we're sending data PHP, and we've got all of these lines of code simplified in just a few lines of code with jQuery doing the exact same thing. Another technology that we're going to be touching on is PHP. So we're going to be using PHP as our server encode to retrieve that JSON data, because you do, in order to make it dynamic and to send information over and have something happen with that information, we do need a server end, and this is where PHP is going to come in, because PHP is an ideal way to interact and retrieve that information, do something with the information that's sent over into our database, update it, and send back some response back to that AJAX call. And in the next lesson, we're going to be creating some JavaScript objects. We're going to start by creating JavaScript objects, showing you how they work, also then transforming those into JSON files and JSON data, and then we're going to look at interacting with that data via AJAX, and then we're also going to look at PHP and the database interactions. So all of this is coming up in the next sets of lessons.